So, Damian Darksyn, you are a DJ, a producer, a writer, and an event designer. And you are known for quite a few things. One is an immersive rave game called Chrono Chamber. You were the former producer for Ninja X Machina, and you are currently working on your multimedia project, The Night Side. I am super excited to have you here. Welcome.
X. I'm, as they say, excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. So, of the things that I just mentioned, what's top of mind for you?
In the next couple months, I'm really going to be digging into the writing process. So,
Okay.
yeah, with that Night Side project, it's multimedia, and there therefore has to be multiple kinds of media. So, I got some music, and I have some short stories. I've always loved rock operas. And that's pretty much like my motto with writing music is that I pretty much try to like write rock operas as much as possible or, anything narratively driven. And I have a friend who I have collaborated with to illustrate some of the stories as well. She does like anime, hentai, monster girl art, that kind of fun thing.
Okay.
You can find her, Neko AI, on Instagram, etc. So those are the main components, and I do audio stuff, so I'd love to do audiobooks at some point.
So we know, focusing on writing, and we know that the Night Side is a multimedia project. Can you tell us, one, the inspiration behind the Night Side, and two, what is it? What's it about?
Yes, well, okay, so I am an apocalypse god. Everything that I do is about the end of the world. The Night Side project, I'm got like two prongs of approach. One of them is there is a storyline where a psychonaut and scientist named Maxwell Lilly figures out how to entangle his consciousness with other, non-local universe states via a mixture of like sensory deprivation, neurohaptic feedback, and an intelligent release system for a blend of mostly psychedelic drugs. So, on one thread of writing, we have Lilly's journals and his initial forays into the world called the Night Side. It's not the only one. I have a bunch, in my notes waiting, but this is the one that I feel most resonant with of the so-called Lillian worlds. So we have this is one of his first successful entanglements. So that's like the first journal entry, which is available on my Patreon for free. There's also like a free 7-day trial for all this stuff. So I'll do a couple bonus drops this week. So far, we've got 2 journal entries from Lilly up there. The first one being the first entanglement. The second being like, oh man, why have I not been able to do this? And finally, I did it again. But oh no, my aide ordered pizza and forgot to answer the door because they fell asleep. So now I have a hangover because I got accidentally woken up for just pizza. I try to keep a bit of silly edge in it, but it's really intense. A lot of the time I am very intense, but in a crazy maniacal trickster, quasi-villain kind of way. So in the very first story, there's a tree that has this gelatinous root, and then it can sort of pick up on the morphological structure of beings within its vicinity, probably through some kind of echolocation mechanism now that I'm thinking about it. And it can mimic the infantile form of whatever's trying to get at the roots. When the roots get exposed, they warp into an infant mimic. And then
A little terrifying, but cool.
Yeah. And so it's really useful in medicine. So they harvest it, and the scene is there's a father and a son, and the father's taking his son Radis out into the woods to teach him a more complicated foraging technique. And when you cut it, it wheels and squelches and then implodes in a gelatinous mess. And that's it. Because he's just learning to entangle his consciousness with places. He'll pick up on a signature and then it'll fade out and then it'll pick up on another one. And then as he explores these alternate worlds more, he kind of ends up getting locked into the world that the Night Side stories are named after. It's called Elysium 9. Elysium 9 is part of a field of planets, the Elysian fields. And only 3 of them work, though. I think there's 12. They were made as part of a last-ditch effort of a firstly an enslaved society, but they're man, it's just, we gotta rebel so bad that, they do mostly destroy successful rebellions on the planets that they're on, but what if we got real strategic about it? There's a kind of like social Darwinist capitalist hellscape with like these transhumanist eternal overlords running a slave empire off somewhere, and that's
Yeah.
like the thing that makes this offshoot strategy happen. So this new world is founded by the underdog, people who might have more socialist, anarchist inclinations. They develop a really robust movement and send out a number of different strategies for, creating a better world, a better way. Somebody creates an AI, or a couple of them rather, that they shoot off into the universe, and these AI are trained on like astrological and like planetary data, and their job is to try a bunch of different, what's the word they use, procedurally generated. They're going to procedurally generate a bunch of planets out in the middle of nowhere. So this is like more or less successful. This is, no one's ever made a thing that procedurally generates planets, so you get some mistakes, right? Some of them are just totally non-functional. On Elysium 9, where the Nightsider stories are from, it doesn't have a day-night cycle because there's this big band with a nuclear reactor and like some filters that make it an effective sun, and it's supposed to spin around, but when you get inside the spinning mechanism, it's like when AI art first draws hands and fingers, and there's just like mechanisms all over the place and things blocked against each other. So, the thing that mattered the most, it was like, I guess this is what you do. And of course, they didn't have time or resources to give feedback to these things out in the wild. So that's the reason it's called the night side, is because like half the planet is stuck in eternal day, and then another half is stuck in eternal night. And they've had to adapt. They're very, very effective ecological engineers, the people who have like created and settled on this planet. So manipulating an ecology to suit their needs, they got something, they can work with that. I do like to play the hard sci-fi game, but I like having a sort of dark fantasy, fantastical edge, because a lot of classic sci-fi does feel really emotionally out of touch. I'm trying to not do that. I think it's really important that we have like emotional intelligence and awareness. So I've actually realized that like a big block in my writing up until this point is that I really wanted to write romance novels, and I just didn't have the repertoire of language in my mind to like understand that as a drive that I could have.
Sparkle.
I can't remember what flipped the switch exactly. Oh, it was Gideon the Ninth. Gideon the Ninth. It's a sci-fi book. The tag is lesbian necromancers explore a haunted gothic palace in space. Is great. Do you have anything that you want to pitch in? I could talk forever.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I got the summary right. So it's the adventures of Lily, the last name Lily, just kind of exploring these new worlds that they discover, one of them being the Night Side, which is part of this collection of planets, Elysium. This specific one was Elysium 9. But kind of their adventures going through all of that and engaging with this world. And as they do so, they figure out more of the lore and the stories and, characters and developments in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And the basis for a lot of this seems to be hard sci-fi, but with, like you said, a dark fantasy element. Because you want to blend the two things to where, one, like, you can very hand-wavy explain these things with sci-fi technobabble, but you can also delve into the fantasy aspect of it, so you have that world building and you have that lore that you can reach into with these fantastical elements, and it's not too down to earth, so to speak.
Yeah, the lore is hugely important, and I remembered like the beginning of the tangent that I just took a break on, which is that there are kind of like two prongs of this writing project. Yeah, this one is much more of a hard sci-fi, and I really like, I've been reading a lot about sort of military, rebellious, revolutionary stuff. Like, I tend to be a very lofty thinker, but something just like possessed me one day, and then I was like, I am a thinker, and I just was watching videos on like war and global conflict and global strategy and espionage, and I'm just like, filled with fascination. I'm very much a fan of Plato's theory of artists, as receivers of muses. You get into a state of madness, you open up and something else flows through you. So Athena's been flowing through me pretty hard, and I think it's very important that sort of military strategic lens, and not obviously on the perspective of like being militaristic or like being on the side of the military, but like the guerrilla asymmetrical warfare side of things. Like, how do you, as a person with a boot on their neck, fight against the person who is wearing the boot while it's ugly, right? An important part about this too is that it's not really perfect. There's still conflict that happens. Like, there's never really going to be a utopia. I'm trying to capture that. And that's like encoded in things like the first opening scene we have is that the nature itself has this like Lovecraftian eerie quality. It is like an accidental offshoot of this intended ecological protocol that they've implemented to make the night side capable of growth. Yeah, everything's a little bit weird. At one point early in their history, there was like a little cannibalist cult that formed because they found this like weird fungus that started parasitizing them. Um, and a little trailing back, the other prong of the thing, so that's like very realistic, pragmatic stuff. But the Nightsiders, what they've done is they have integrated the dark and the underworldly into their culture and their religion. So, they when they're doing their religion stuff, it's like, hey, do you want to go see the rock opera about the god of love and death, like killing people and making zombies and shit? And they'll be like, yeah. Is there going to be like a dance party after? They're like, yeah, we're going to fucking rave until 7 a.m. And that's how they, integrate certain elements of society that we've had a hard time doing, like waxing very wide strokes over a very complicated history. A significant part of the problems of like the 17th, 18th, 20th century was the attempt to suppress ecstasy and ecstatic experience violently. And that leads to like 1994 when you have this book called Siberia published about rave culture. And then the author is like, yeah, a rave's kind of cool because like people, they like look each other in the eyes and don't bite. And you could just dance with someone and it's not weird. And you could also dance with two people. Like, what? And it's kind of weird and culturally jarring to read from someone who grew up in the era that like raves informed. My everyday experience is very much people are very like loosey-goosey. There's a really heavy openness of the heart, maybe sometimes too open in like, festival going, poly, all love and open heart people, the new agey folks. There's a little sort of melting pot for this kind of stuff. But being around that a whole bunch, like I was like, man, I cannot believe that was actually that much of a problem, that like that sentence would be phrased that way. People would just go be aggressive, like not look at anyone, like sort of, assault people. And that was like what was normal. Crazy. So, that is, a little small thing, but it's attached to this like long history we've had of like our struggle getting used to, the body. The Nightsiders, they got it. And their lore is fun as hell because I'm trying to show what like a modern mythology would look like and like what a contemporary religious practice that's not nested inside any of the other religions we have going on. Like there was a time before Christianity, there's gonna be a time after it, right? It's honestly gotta die. A big thing that's inspiring me is this book called The Religion of the Future. It's by a Harvard lawyer. And I would recommend it be read by anybody who can deal with the same thing being said a lot. It's fantastic. It's meant to be read like academic chapters. So that book's really important. And so, not only do I get this opportunity to show what this, idealized culture that I have in mind is idealized in the sense that oh my God, could you imagine if people actually like integrated their worst demons? What? And then there's their lore. So that's where I get to go really off the rails magical. Man. It took me so long to say that sentence.
Yo, you're good. But it sounds like you're doing fantastic world building elements. I can't remember, it might have been Brandon Sanderson or it might have been the people who wrote Avatar: The Last Airbender, but they talked about world building and how you have to have, in order for it to be good, you have to have so many different elements at play. One is like the physical geography of the landscape and how does that influence society, culture, trade, economy, all of that. And from that, you have to then, distill like, okay, how do these people interact with each other? What cultures, get created due to this geography, this world, the resources that are available, the things that people experience. And you continue to weave these different paths of how all of these different concepts are interrelated. And they have to be, otherwise you have disconnect and it doesn't feel like a believable story. But so long as everything works well with itself within the contained world that you've built, you can really delve into super fantastical elements and it feels believable because it is in line with everything else that has been established in that world. So, sounds like you're hitting the nail on the head here.
Yeah, I've been learning that by trial and error, definitely. There's a lot, and then you come up across a thing and you're like, I guess I gotta go rewrite a whole bunch of stuff. But I'm never really like, I do have a kind of, I flip back and forth between like letting the story carry out itself and discovering, but I do really need like a lot of high level stuff to work with. So I've been working on this world for a number of years. It's like changed in shape. It's based on a world that I had conceived when I was a tiny human and liked a lot.
Okay, so we've talked quite a bit about the night side. I'd be curious about your other project, the Chrono Chamber. Are there any relation between the two? Is it a separate entity in itself? Can you tell me more?
Well, it shares my mission in that the Chrono Chamber is an anarchist organization. It's an intergalactic organization, and its mission is to go to technologically advanced worlds that are nearing some kind of civilizational upheaval, and to prepare and or arm the local people that they have developed a trusting relationship with to like help them make a better world and the ashes of the following one. So, we're revolving around the apocalyptic themes that I love so much. It takes on a very different shape. That one's like much more stereotypically cyberpunk. Fashion as a component of the world is very, very important, right? Because kind of how people dress indicate like what they're doing. In a sci-fi world where people are constantly on lookout for trouble from some oppressive force, especially if the narrative is focused on somebody who's in a revolutionary position, well, it makes sense that they have a lot of straps on them and tactical stuff and like, bulletproof vests, that kind of thing. So the Chrono Chamber, it's a bit more focused on that sort of like, hey, we might have to fight era of the revolutionary sci-fi tropes. Whereas the Night Side, they're going to go through like a fun Lovecraftian cosmic thing. But socially, they're pretty much good. The Chrono Chamber, however, like they are a very good, tight-knit, effective group, but they're used to dealing with combat scenarios. What else? Yeah, so narratively, let's get more into the Chrono Chamber. Do you want to know more about like the lore?
I would love to.
Okay.
Actually, before we hit the lore, can you tell me like what it is in terms of like a format? So what is the Chrono Chamber? What does a person experience when they go in? Because you mentioned it's an immersive game.
The vibe is that it's like it's a rave. It's a cyberpunk rave. And you go in there, it's a costume party. Everyone we encourage to wear costumes. It's not mandatory because, what I tell people is, hey, listen, this thing is coming to Earth. Like, if you're just an Earth person visiting, it's all good. That's what they want. And also, everyone's going to be in costume. They're all making a cool party for you. Why would you not want to be there? So everything fits. And even people ask me about like costume ideas and stuff. And I'm like, listen, like vibe with your heart. Like in a cyberpunk world, you have pretty much like if it's one of the ones that's more abundance focused rather than, extreme wealth disparity, that kind of thing, especially ones that have like a very thorough VR, AR kind of infrastructure, you can have any kind of way of looking that you want. I like Psycho-Pass the anime. Have you seen Psycho-Pass?
I have not.
Okay, well, if it's not copyright offensive, I'll send you some clips to illustrate what I'm talking about now as well.
Sure.
They have such like Japan, borders are cut off. They have like this AI overseer, AR everywhere. So all of the rooms are very simple with basic furniture, but you wake up every morning, you're like, hey, I kind of want like a Renaissance vibe today. And it pastes a hologram over everything.
What's your desired room preference for today?
I guess Victor Horta's Hotel Tassel.
Great! I'll pull the design for the library!
Yeah, so that's the kind of AR that I'm talking about. If we currently have social movements that are like, Japanese kids dressing up like Elvis or, English kids dressing up like they're from like the Edwardian period, why wouldn't that continue? Of course, you're going to have a crazy cowboy with maybe disco boots in a cyberpunk world. Or my one friend, Azalea, who's also a very good DJ, was like, I just like being a witch. And I'm like, okay, well then maybe you're part of like an online guild and your thing is that you like wear a witch hat to signify. And they were like, oh my God. Yes. And they came so excited with this whole story. And what I really like is when people kind of drive the role play for themselves as well. We have like a couple sort of game things set up as part of it. We usually have like an area that has projectors everywhere. And I've developed some like media assets that are world filler. So that'd be things like, welcome to the Chrono Chamber. Here's our active military teams. Our number one team is this one, or they're like highlighting a local team, and that'll take, modeling photos of friends of mine, either from shoots we've done or from things they've done independently. I'll give each of them like a name and like a sort of video game stat count of like how many kills they've got on record, what their specialties are. animate these all together. So create the feel that there really is like a sort of culture there. There's like an AI news reporter who gets up there, and I've made it look like it's like a 90s Game Boy or Nintendo RPG.
Oh,
So
I
it's just
love
like
that.
a talking head, and it's got like some simple text, which gives you highlights of the mission that's ongoing. But with that mission, actually, there's been an encrypted message spread throughout the bar that you have to go and like watch carefully on different screens, because there's also screens showing like, you know, stereotype types of corpo ads from like Cyberpunk and other media. A friend of mine made one for it in more of like a ritzy, high end kind of feel. There's an installation where there's like a cryo chamber with Maxwell Lilly sleeping in it, like, and you can see on the
Ooh.
projector above him the worlds that he's channeling in his consciousness. So it's funny.
Uh-huh.
We got a whole bunch of props from The Expanse, the sci-fi show, and
Oh, nice.
yeah, the shirt that I'm wearing is from The Expanse. It's awesome because everything goes on so cheap. So like this shirt, this is like a $500 shirt. I got it for like $30. So we got like, you know, a TD set worth of props from the sci-fi show.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
So it looks really good. Got a whole bunch of computer monitors. I sent a message to my friend. I was like, "Hey, do you want to? Can I send you $50 for the bath video?" They're like, "Yeah." They're an actor. I've had them in mind for this role for a while, so I was happy that we were able to make that work. And then just strap a TV in the open part of the chamber, and then you just have like a visualizer of him on there that occasionally goes through like brain stats and stuff. We've had a group called the Hogtown Collective. They're like a cyberpunk techwear photo shoot modeling collective. They had a little booth in the back as well. In the past, we've had some professional live action roleplay groups doing game facilitation. So it is an immersive rave game, and the games change. There's not really been like a central narrative or thread. What it is an arena to kind of experiment with stuff. So yeah, it's not like there's a whole thing that I can tell you. I mean, I can tell you the vibe, why it's there, like what they do, the technology it works on. But for now, I'm really just playing with it like as if this thing was here IRL. It would take a while for them to open up and like make strategic partnerships. So
Sure.
right now, like the mission of the Chrono Chamber party as one facet of the Chrono Chamber as an institution, it's like an outreach strategy. They begin making connections, finding out who to trust, who not to trust, that kind of thing. So, you know, it hasn't been too long for that to happen.
Okay. I mean, all of that sounds fantastic. So my takeaway is the Chrono Chamber. It's like an atmospheric sandbox. People can kind of go in. It's a little bit choose your own adventure, but it's just a really cool place to exist in with an overwhelming amount of lore behind it as
Yes.
people continue to look and poke at things and dig a little bit deeper and interact with stuff.
Mhm.
That's really, really awesome. Really
Yeah,
cool.
overwhelming is a good word for it.
Yeah.
I do think about too many things, which is why I mentioned a book, Gideon the Ninth, a while ago. And what I really liked about it is that it feels like you're drowning in a world because it only kind of slow releases details to you. And then just runs really deep into like really unnecessarily deep lore. And you're like, what the fuck is happening? Why am I kind of turned on right now? It's a great read. It's super fun, but it has that kind of overwhelming feeling. So it's nice to see something like that because admittedly, my brain can be a little bit too overwhelming for people. One common thing about immersive cyberpunk events like this, Neotropolis, the festival in California that I've performed at with Ninja Ex Machina, they have like, and it's America too, right? I'm Canadian, if people didn't know that already. So the gun culture, it extends into that kind of thing where people make like sort of fashion objects out of Nerf guns and toy guns and that kind of thing. I was thinking about this and I was like, you know what? I don't want to do that because we were doing a photo shoot for the Chrono Chamber one day. And like, everyone's doing the same thing where they got their model guns. And I'm like, man, I'm fucking 32 years old and I'm here going like gang, guns are cool. That's cool. There was a kind of like funny irony about it, but that was not really sort of an intentional choice on my part. When I started to think intentionally about it, I was like, yeah, I like that kind of stuff. Like, again, narratively driven things. I'm not here to like promote like, the sort of coolness of like vigilante militant violence because I think that it is sometimes necessary. And so we got to like be very careful about how we're talking about it when things are getting more and more tense socioculturally,
Yeah.
which they
Yeah.
are. So, fashion is important in the world, and in the world that I want to create, I want people to have like a healthy attitude towards guns. So For the Chrono Chamber, I'm having like a no-gun policy, because if you think about it narratively as an immersive event, why the fuck would they allow you as somebody they don't know in a new world to come in with weapons? It doesn't click, it doesn't vibe, right? So the story takes priority over everything. In my event organizing experience, what I do is I'm like, okay, everyone, you've got pretty much free reins on X, Y, Z, but I'm going to be extremely strict about like a couple of parameters, right? You can do anything within parameter X, Y, Z, right? Because I've got a sort of a vision in line for, what I want people to learn, how I want people to see the world, and that kind of thing. Guns as fashion objects, not too about it. I think we should have a sort of, a reverence for them, a kind of like sacred reverence and awe, which comes with an appropriate degree of humility and terror over these things that we should not be happy about having to use sometimes. And yeah, it's a little experimental container. I'm not sure if I'm going to do another one within like the next couple of months. I can, we got a good scaffold to start talking about other projects. I have a little list here. It's a little bit of a long list, but
Let's go through it. Let's hit that list.
The Chrono Chamber thing is, oh my god, so much energy. We got like a good brand working up around it, but my higher order project is called the Dream Arena. So once I build more connections and more projects and stuff, that's kind of like the name of like my art collective business thing that I'd like to eventually see be a self-sustaining, thriving, worker-owned cooperative entity that can prove that the idea that worker-owned co-ops are not economically viable is just propagandic bullshit.
It's all propaganda.
Oh my god, I lose my mind. I work as an audiovisual technician. I just like, it's not my passion necessarily, but I like it a lot more than everything else that I could do. The thing is that I've been working in too much corporate gigs, and it's been fucking draining my soul, like being around like fucking real estate agents and goddamn.
As it does.
Imagine me talking like I am right now, being like, we gotta fight the fight, make more anarchists, and I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of people who
Full
are
of
like, raise your
MBAs
glasses in this 5-star restaurant to 30% increases in rent in this area. We are making so much money. Woo! Oh my god. Like, if I like this. No, wait. Should I is this interesting? Or do you want me to go
It is
back?
fascinating. Go for it. Nope.
Okay.
Yep. Keep
There's
going.
this activist, ecological activist named Derek Jensen. I don't know too much about him, but I was lent a book of his by a partner of mine in the past. And I really liked its style and like the kind of serious directness that it has, where the vibe is kind of like, hey, listen, if you want to like be an ecologist or like, oriented towards activism of any kind, you have to at least be willing to accept that blowing up the dam is going to do a lot more for less effort than any kind of canvassing or whatever else. I have sat in so many US government meetings, and I have spoken endlessly at these idiots who will not listen for so long. And he just kind of like lives in a forest on his own. The book is really deeply interesting because it's like an exploration of his own trauma. And he's like, the way that it's framed is he's like, I kind of can't not go through my sort of social analysis without touching back into how these social forces like made my father a destructive, horrible, abusive person. Because that happens to everyone, and the system creates people like that. And yeah, I really like that. And I really take that to heart. I am willing to admit totally that, like, oh my God, I don't want to go blow up a thing, but I'm at least... I do recognize that, yes, in certain cases, it would be strategically effective. Now, being a person who thinks like that and sitting in a room full of fucking real estate agents literally clinking their glasses to raising rent prices is extremely difficult. So part of me is either like, I gotta call some people and be a spy, or I gotta like work in a theater. And so look, I am too much of a coward to go call the spy people. So I am gonna go work in a theater and try to do more of that kind of stuff. It's a lot happier, and it keeps my head out of this stuff. Like I'm thinking about, social forces and depression and, social strategy constantly. And so to be around people who are like, look, I believe that you and a lot of people around you like experience you as a good person, but like you cannot actually be a good person with the incentives of the world that we have around us today. Yeah. Oh my God. There's definitely like a sort of like wear and tear on the compassion muscles. So, well, the less real estate agents I'm around, I feel the happier I'll be as a person.
It's a very specific breed or person that goes into real estate and also becomes successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And listen. I inevitably at some point will be a comedian, so I don't want anyone to listen to me and think like, oh my god, this person's an asshole, because I do exaggerate things comedically because I'm a chaotic trickster demon. That's who I am. The last good revelation I had on mushrooms is that, listen, you can try as hard as you want, but you are crazy. You just have to be okay with it. Other people, they're gonna notice. If you want to be more chill and happy, you just gotta let go, embrace the insanity. That has been great. So now we can get back to the insanity of the other projects.
Sure.
So you talked about like the Nightsider narrative, the Patreon and stuff. I'm calling it the cult of the dark sign. A little playful tongue-in-cheek thing. Ever since I touched a mushroom, people have been like, so why are you starting a cult? Am I already in your cult? So, I was like, gonna lean into it a little bit. Just like with back in the day, there was enough people telling me that I had a radio voice that I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna reach out to Brock University's radio station and have a radio show.
I could hear it.
Yeah, I like to, see what people see and like see if I vibe with that. So we're starting a playful cult. A thing I haven't mentioned yet that's like talked about Dream Arena, Chrono Chamber, and that was a little tangential, but all that stuff was like, mission adjacent. I've got this thing that I'm working on called Ophira. It is an art car. I think the website is ophirathestalker.com, something like that. It's fun. It's like an old eldritch deity, and it is a car, the ones that go to Burning Man and like festivals and they like light on fire and shit. These people I like because, well, actually I met Matt, the one who's coordinating the project, and she has a makerspace up north, a couple hours north of Toronto. I met her at the first Chrono Chamber that we ever did, that off-world bar. It was great because it was like, we weren't making like a private event per se. We wanted to like have a ticketed event and do something for the bar, but it was open to the public. So especially before the bar really knew what we were going for on this first time, we just had a bunch of regular people sitting around having dinner, and then all of a sudden I get there and start throwing down cyber beats. In a couple minutes, Nat beside me, and they're like, do you do this at other places? And I was like, yeah. They were like, I want to DJ at my farm. And yeah, so I met them there. They do a lot of like immersive, interactive art stuff, and I got a good vibe from this because, unlike a lot of the just really go-getter, I need to make cool, shiny stuff energy in a lot of like maker Burning Man spaces, they're like, well, the story is really important. And I was like, well, that's everything that I believe. So they have a narrative, which I am now taking point on. And I'm part of the sound team, so I'm doing the sort of like narrative and script writing, and this will make more sense when I mention that inside the art car, there's kind of like, it's like inside the belly of the beast. There's like a surround sound system. There will be some like couches you can lounge on, and there are these like audioscapes that play throughout. So yeah, I'm happy about writing that. Again, it really does give me like some good like apocalypse energy stuff to work with. So there's like one sentence that I always write, and I'm like, okay, I'm at the base of this. One philosopher called it like a mythologium, where it's like the sort of the central structure from which a variety of myths radiate, but it's like a similar sort of like mythic theme, like the myth of the hero, for example, would be like a mythologium. You condense it into these aphorisms, and then you can scale up into a whole bunch of stuff. So yeah, the apocalypse one, the sacred dark mythologium around which my consciousness circulates, having a good time with this project too. It is a bunny, I think, or like a jackalope, decaying, and it has like fire antlers. And so yeah, you go into the belly of this like decay god. The story that I've made up for it seems everyone's pretty cool with it, and it might change. I don't think anyone's gonna like be like, oh no, you shouldn't say that. The things that I've developed just this morning were that Ophira is a god of regeneration. So unlike the other gods of her era, she is like precariously poised between life and death, like the networks of mycelium whose tongues reach out for dead things to pull them apart, reconstitute them, and enable other life to pour forth from the black nothingness of the dirt. Shit like that. So yeah, there's like this interesting in-between space, in between like life and death, There's a good book called Death and Sensuality by a weirdo named George Bataille, early 20th century. Kind of Sadian in his writing. He wrote a famous story called The Story of the Eye that ends in like
Unacceptable!
something. Yeah,
Okay.
there's this really unhinged erotica. So in Death and Sensuality, he talks about like human sacrifice being this revelation of, this greater entity of like life as such that transcends the individual. The soul is like, absorbed into the whole because, you kill an individual, obviously, you don't kill everybody. On
Yeah.
the website for Ophira, it mentioned that, they're trying to like inspire other art card communities to make a narrative thing. They're like, every story needs a villain. So I've kind of expanded it to be that there is a cult of Ophira. They are the stalkers. And so they began a journey from, hearing echoes in their dreams that went along similar themes and reports of various miracles, such as the sudden blooming of flowers in the winter or the strange and sudden taking hold of the general consciousness by psychedelic mushrooms. And investigating these phenomena, they found this like residual energy pulse of Ophira, which basically was just like, revolving around like, its very energy is that pulse away from void. And so it's just hanging out on the edge of void. Every time it gets too close, it has this like pulse of its essence again, pulling it away from void. And with those pulses come these miracles. They've kind of like found, spiritually where the entity is, and they've like started a cult around her. That's given her enough power to like manifest like an articulate voice and more of a form. And the art car is the cult having built a temple and prosthetic for this disembodied god. Yeah, that's, maybe going to be Ophira. We're going to do some workshopping and stuff, but I feel like a lot of those ideas will stick. It's pretty fun. I like, because of the mixed reality stuff, narrative devices that make the thing make sense, right? Like the Chrono Chamber is a very literal narrative because its mission is literally exactly the mission that I'm trying to do. Like it's just
Right.
very direct, right? And then with Ophira too, we could try to get people to suspend their disbelief and see this, glorified bus as literally that thing, or we could be a crazy cult to have built a prosthetic limb to house a disembodied deity, and then the car itself is a part of the framework and the world and whatever. Whenever I'm doing narrative building for performance stuff, that's a critical thing that I think of is like, what's the intersection point between that narrative world and our world? Because that's the point where we like introduce other people and get them playing around. And that phenomena of bleed, where the world kind of like bleeds into the everyday, that is very interesting and important, right? It's like, going back to talking about like Tolkien and enchantment, those moments are like moments of enchantment. We can give people a little shot of magic every now and then. But there's a really interesting intersection between art and technology right now, not like the AI bullshit, but like interactive, immersive sorts of things, brain wave readers that are being integrated into art experiences, that kind of stuff is like a really interesting movement happening where I heard on a podcast, it was phrased like all of the artists are also becoming like scientists and engineers because of having to like design these network systems for their weird experiences. A great book that anyone should read. It's called Technosis. And it is a book from 98. It's been updated with a couple chapters in the 2000s, but it's like an essential book in media studies about the internet and communication technologies. It goes all the way from ancient Alexandria to like, Timothy Leary's Cyberpunk, we all need to become perfect cyborg era, mid 90s and that kind of thing. But a lot of it, even I know it's updated, so probably some of the stuff's been changed, but like it's impossible to tell because it just reads so relevant. And especially like a really well done like philosophy or sociology or history book, like it can't not, if it's well written, it can't not be true like 10 years later, right? Like ancient Alexandria, we basically know. So there's this one guy there, his name's Hero of Alexandria, and he was one of the first sort of like engineers, inventor types that we have a record of. And a lot of his jobs were making like theatrical devices for temples. So he built a statue where behind it, the priest would have like, so there's a wall with statues against it. Behind the wall, there's a priest standing with like a megaphone and a thing that makes the mouth move. And you can fucking talk to the god. He built another thing, which was like in the altar, you would light a fire, and it would have like a hydraulic pump that would close the doors of the back of the temple. So engineering, magic, enchantment, technology have always been deeply interwoven. Some other examples he gives are like of the Hermetic tradition and like some of the older texts that we have attributed to like the OG Hermetic stuff, not like the contemporary remake of it, popular in like the sort of pop culture version of occult stuff. But there's tales of mystical cities where like there are like talking statues, and like the way that they interact with them is kind of like if you had a ubiquitous computing environment and you had a sort of narratively or verbal driven kind of like information processing. They're like descriptions of like the New Jerusalem in the articulations of certain ancient philosophers, poets, priests, whatever. Which you're like, you read that and you're like, yeah, that could definitely like you could make that. Like that's like a Google neighborhood now,
Yeah.
So the dreams have always been there, especially the one of soul making. That one's very interesting.
It's funny how you mentioned like the evolution of these things, because back then, ancient Alexandria, the cutting edge technology is, dude with a megaphone behind a statue talking mouth.
Yeah.
Nowadays, like you said earlier, is people have to be scientists and engineers to figure this shit out and to be on the cutting edge of stuff. I can't remember where I came across this, but there was a quote that I read just the other day, like, it was why, inventions and cutting edge technology was so much simpler in the past. Like Isaac Newton invented calculus at 23. And why don't we have great inventors of our day now? It's because the ante is just so much fucking harder, because
Mm.
not nowadays, not all of us can build, a 7-mile chamber underneath Geneva to smash particles together, because that's where the edge is now. So with science and technology, like, we talked about the megaphone dude with the statue, but nowadays we have to delve into advanced technologies, computation, AI, engineering, electronics, robotics, just to be on that edge once again. The ante is so much higher.
Yeah, it is to some degree. But one thing that I've learned is that as far as people's perceptions go in a performance space, bar is very low. You
Sure,
throw some
sure.
lights at people, they're very happy. But yes, for like scientific innovations, definitely. Right, yeah. So this year, I've decided not to go to Neotropolis. It's very expensive. I want to build a show that is more capable with my means and my goals. So that means like a touring project that I can have some grants that it is applicable for. So I'm building a new project. I had the Ninja X Machina show that I was doing the last 2 years, which is super cool. Made some good friends, got some good connections for some more musically oriented work. But man, I got to slow the heck down. I've been exhausted, burnt the hell out. Moving was a big priority. I'm like a crazy mad scientist all the time. So having like a good creative space with a lot of flow, very important. And with that, I want to like take more of an intentional approach rather than trying to like run as fast as I can. Like low volume, high impact is a motto I try very hard to live by in a world that does not try to educate you to think that way at all.
Yes.
Yeah, so I am trying to build another kind of like theatrical, music theater oriented low arts show. I've got Astaroth on board, who's a good collaborator. We've got a song coming out in a couple months. I've got a feature on one of their songs. And we work on events occasionally. I've DJ'd for them when they performed and teaching them to DJ as well. I've been like, hey, can I just like, your character works with the thing that I want. Can I just use you as a puppet? And they were like, hey, if you can help me design a show in August called the Demon Core Rituals, then yes, you can use me as an actor. So we got 2 fun things happening out of that exchange. The more imminent one, I might have actually a show in Montreal for the week of Neotropolis, which is end of April. Super cool, because it'll still give me my sort of like spiritual kick. Like I do kind of see it, a very intense person, I've said. So like Neotropolis is kind of like a religious pilgrimage to me. So it's nice to do something that's like spiritually, like I go out on the cyber mission at the same time. And that's satisfactory. Much less expensive, and like, the sort of strategic goal of growing the culture, growing like my personal brand, etc. These are all good things that I need to do. And I do like to focus more locally. The default logic is basically every business, be it like a car manufacturer or an artist, has to be their own colonizing force to appropriate as much of the available attention as humanly possible. Normally, in the case of arts, just around the proposition that I am so cool and I am better than everybody. So that was like a hurdle for me to get over with art, which is why like the sort of meaning thing has been very important to me, and like having like a sort of strategic mission at play, bringing back the artist as the prophet, the revelator, not merely the entertainer. The Montreal thing would be cool as part of that. You know, it's always apocalypse stuff. So Astaroth is great because they're like a demon lord. They aspire to be an incarnation of Astaroth, or at least a prophet for Astaroth, the god of knowledge. I like that. They got this whole sort of like immersive narrative theatrical thing, and they have a mission. They also want like people to be good people, not just to like glorify themselves. So they're a great collaborator. Although the aesthetic of Sam's work is a lot like that. There's a lot of like, you know, naked girls eating blood off each other and that kind of thing.
Very demon stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely part of a process of sort of like, you know, purging cultural demons through
It's a very
the lens of
specific
the IT.
aesthetic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun, and I like it for certain reasons. There's a good theology of horror that we could talk about at some point, but there's a thread in certain kind of cyberpunk where there's like an occult dimension to it that I find really fun and interesting. A theme in that book, Technosis, too, is that like, listen, guys, never has it been the case that we have had like a purely rational, disenchanted view of technology and whatever. People have always been like, oh my God, I think technology means that God is real, that we are God, and that we have to fucking ascend into the machine to complete God's process of perfection. And it's like, okay, slow down. It's 1945. You just built the computer. Relax.
Yeah.
Like immediately, like right, ChatGPT gets released. People are like, that is alive. Immediately. So fast.
Yep. People want to believe.
Yeah. But it's a fun thing to play with. Like Neon Genesis, for example, is a popular one, anime that probably most people have seen. It is, you know, angels are coming to attack Earth. It opens the intro scene, shows like the Kabbalah Tree of Life, like an actual like cut of it from like a 1500s manual from Spain or something. And, you know, they have like Adam, the primordial being, chained downstairs. Love that. There's another anime recently, I think it's called like Demon Lord 2099. There's a demon lord who's been like frozen in time for a while. Technology happens and he like comes back and he's like, all right, time for me to do my thing again. But no one believes in him, so he has no power, and he's got to go out in the world and like figure out how to engage in like modern cyberpunk whatever. He becomes a streamer, and then he'll introduce himself to villains like with his streamer name and be like, witness the power of 1 million followers.
Fantastic.
Another good one, which will be a huge influence, is Mullet Mad Jack, which is a game. It's normally about $20, and it's amazing. It's very timely. You open up a level, and he'll say, let's kill some billionaires. It's so good. It's like 30-second levels a lot of the time. I won't go into too much of the premise, but like you should definitely cut some shots of it. It's fucking amazing. The driving tension is that this robot billionaire kidnaps this like virgin e-girl anime streamer waifu princess and like uses her blood, running it like over every algorithmic permutation of demonic sigils to see if they can like, they've got all the power here, but is there more power to get? So there's like scenes of her like, you know, crucified with like sigils flashing on a digital screen with like a gold robot with a shotgun in the background. That's like the narrative inspiration storyboard.
Okay.
So I want to do kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde thing with Sam, where, you know, it's like, okay, you know, we've exhausted our strategic options. Like with the warfare is so asymmetrical that I need to resort to like demonic influence. So he builds this quantum computing mask meant to entangle with forces that may or may not exist, things that inhabit realms of uncertainty, that when you look too carefully, they dissipate, but their influence seems all around us if we just share our stories about them, but if we try to look too close, they're nowhere to be seen. So he basically tries to like entangle this with one of these like may or may not be there occult chance complexes, succeeds in doing so, and then with the cyber mask, like becomes an incarnation of Astaroth, and then so, you know, we'll have like a mad science scene, we'll drop one of Sam's songs, he'll sort of like practice his powers. He'll call in some servants who he'll like command. So Sam will be in the center doing like hand movements as like his like warrior slaves whose consciousness he's inhabiting are like off doing their thing. So that's the idea.
Okay. That sounds like a lot of fun. So from the base of this, it really sounds like you have a storyboard and an aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you just go way the fuck in and you really start fleshing out all of the details. Okay.
Yeah, totally.
I love it.
Yeah, some of them are like non-optional, like the apocalypse theme. Like I have no choice. I just got to embrace who I am. You know? the Demon Core Rituals, that'll be the last project I can kind of talk about. So that's like Sam's big self-driven theatrical event that he's going to do as a yearly feature. The idea being that it is genuinely a demonic ritual of a kind, centered around, of course, the almighty Astaroth. Very kind of like, eyes wide shut, kind of fetish environment is the vibe. We're not really, it was a bit too early to be talking about it too much in depth. They did a kind of preliminary test run of the event last year, but yeah, I'm going to help design that. It'll be super fun. And that's all the projects, I think. Oh, I guess I do with my group, Dream Arena. It's at the Dream Arena on Instagram and stuff. I'm starting up a Discord community and doing some like role-playing games, reading groups to get more familiarized with the sci-fi, cyberpunk stuff. So we're going to do like the Blade Runner book, do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. Going to be posting that in a couple weeks when I have a better idea of how my schedule is going to settle. Yeah, and then, do I have the book yet? I have this role-playing game book, Cryptomancer. It's great. It's also made by people who do hacking, and they try to use it to teach people hacking principles like cryptography, network analysis, and infiltration. But you're an elf or a dwarf in a world where there's a magical crystal. You split it apart. The parts remain connected, so you can have an internet. You can have a CCTV network. You can have like communication networks. So you're like a hacking elf on fun adventures in impossible odds. It's very easy, much easier than D&D. There's a few stats. It's more like also focused on collaborative storytelling. So there's a lot of leeway, like with certain dice roll mechanics. If you do the most amazing roll, then that means you just let the player tell how badass they want to be. Whereas if they fail, they're kind of the victim to circumstance. The game master narrates entirely. So I will be running those in person occasionally. I'm going to experiment soon and do a couple online games to see how well it feels to play online. So if people want to come have fun, I got those like little social endeavors that I have as projects for the near future as well.
Okay, very exciting. Yeah, so before we go, a tradition on this show is the previous guest asks a question for the current guest,
Yes.
not knowing who the current guest may be.
Mhm.
And the question that's left for you is, what medium do you enjoy creating for the most? And it does not have to be the thing that you're best at.
No, the medium that I like creating the most is situations, experience, the medium of consciousness itself. It's why I like mixed reality stuff. I like to play with place, environment, space, situation. That's what everything is all about. It's all about creating that interesting, illuminating situation.
I think that's a fantastic answer, and one that I actually wasn't expecting, because most people, myself included, think like, okay, what medium do they like the most? Is it writing words? Is it, drawing? Is it music and art and, audio stuff? But you say creating experiences,
Yeah.
environments, situations. I think that's fascinating because that's in a way abstracting the others to create something new. But I
Mhm.
also know exactly what you're talking about. It's why escape rooms work so well. It's why other immersive experiences, like D&D, works so well. It's left to the imagination and the creativity and the environment that you're placed in to really craft
Mhm.
that unique experience. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And you come out of those experiences with like, moments of bonding that feels real to you as if you had like actually like gone to a friend's wedding or something and you laugh about them for years
Yeah.
to come.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's even my playful name that I use for DJing is psychospatial curator because I'm trying to like, resonate with the crowd in a kind of energy amplifying way. My if I'm doing a good job, everyone's like losing their mind and they can't stop dancing, right? It's like I control over their cognitive functions by like weaving such an appealing sonic environment that like I change their motivations, who they are, where they want to be at that particular moment. It's very fun.
Yeah, yeah.
And, a lot of this is inspired from like the lens that I came into it with, from like um, being very interested in the study of psychedelics and doing academic study on like wisdom, magic, religion, in addition to like general psychology stuff. So, yeah, I do want to become a therapist at some point, which is another way of doing the art of experiential conducting, let's say. Um, something that the reason why when I touched mushrooms, people were like, "So, do you have a cult now?" Is because I can like it's just very trippy to be with me. I will say that.
Fair
Um,
enough.
and I'm very good at improv. I'm very good at one of the things that made most sense to me when I started to my study at U of T was like Carl Jung's practices, especially active imagination, which is basically just like mindful daydreaming. So, I can make a whole venue psychedelic by, weaving different kinds of media and props throughout the space, but um, it's a lot easier to do that if you give people drugs.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. And that's fun. I always have a lot of fun doing that with people, like doing like active imagination practices, sort of guiding them through dreams and then watching them go like, oh my God, like the insight at the end of the tunnel. It's great. That's kind of like the thing that I practice. Like that would be my craft, is like guiding people towards that spark. Be it via the mundane little aha that we have in our normal everyday, or that profoundly mystical awakening, right? Like the situations in which a lot of the kinds of art that I want to be doing are situated are ones where people are doing a lot of psychedelics already. And at the end of my degree, I did get a small grant to do an ayahuasca study that I had to formulate. First in the formulation was learning how the ethics review process worked, and I was like, oh fucking hell no.
It's a
That is
lot.
gonna take so long. It's like you have to like wait 6 months to have approved. Can I ask this person this question? And then like heaven forbid you want to be like, hey, could you think of this thing while you're doing drugs? And then it's like, oh, I didn't know you're interfering with their experience. I was like, God damn it. I have never once seen a horror movie I've had to sign a fucking like disclosure agreement thing for. If I do art, I can do whatever I want. It's gonna be way more fun.
Yeah.
And I was
Different
talking.
routes to the same thing.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Different routes to get to the same thing.
Yeah, at a much faster route. Like, I just want to have fun and I want to have like a meaningful impact, which is really actually not that possible with like the scientific apparatus. Like that thing is completely co-opted by the forces of capital, right? Like what gets research money and what doesn't obviously has certain kinds of incentives, especially when it comes to medicine and that kind of thing. Seeing that begin to take over the psychedelic space was like a huge like moment for me. I was like, oh my God, I'm so burnt out from this degree already. I got to take a step back. And yeah, I don't know if I feel wholly positive about that whole movement at the current time, but if I can somehow gain some, social media broadcasting power, not I don't imagine that phrase is so annoying because you could understand it. Ways that are the opposite of
I know exactly what you mean.
Anyways, I'll stop rambling for a little bit. Like I said, I gotta wrap up in a minute, but do you want to like ask any like clarifying questions about stuff?
Where is something that you would like to draw people's attention to, and where can people find you?
Well, the easy one where people can find me. I'm like at DJ Darksyn on most things. I do have a TikTok that I don't use very much. I do post on Instagram more regularly. I don't really have a Facebook at the moment. Thinking of divesting from that entirely. What else? Yeah, there's the Patreon, which is also like I think Cult of the Dark Sign on Patreon. But if you go to my Instagram, I've got the link tree with everything readily available. I am on Spotify with some tunes, but I haven't really done a lot of work to get the algorithm to take me seriously. So might be hard to find them without a specific link. Got SoundCloud, Mixcloud, and the Patreon will have like a whole bunch of stuff. So right now, what's available? I made a little mashup album called Retro
Really?
Future Fever Dream, which has a whole bunch of like synth wavy, cheesy cyberpunk songs matched up with like pop and metal songs. So there's that. There's a couple DJ sets, one which I didn't post publicly online. There's 2 stories that I mentioned, 2 of Lily's journals, and a piece of concept art from Neko, the anime artist. Yeah. What else? No, I want to draw people's attention to wherever they, as an independent agent, would like it to go.
Fantastic.
I
love
want
it.
to make anarchists. I'm not out here to tell anybody what to think. Do your research. No, please do not get carried away with that. Don't get culty about it. But yes, I do want to encourage more independent associations. So that's what feels appropriate at the current time.
I love it. All right. Well, Damien, this has been a wonderful chat. Thank you so much for spending the time with me. I love hearing about your story, your creative efforts, and your art. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for giving me a little platform for my madness, my little soapbox for the day. Thank you.
Absolutely. Cheers.